Hey guys, I'm Chad Hoover with Kayak Bass Fishing, and welcome to Fish USA's Phases of Fishing. All right guys, so before we jump into today's Phases of Fishing video, I gotta say a special thanks to the folks at LakeBigBass.com, Lake County, Florida, for making this series possible. Let's jump right into it and talk about power or finesse fishing. I get this comment quite a bit. Hey Chad, should I fish power or finesse when chasing bass during the spring? And the answer to that question is yes. All right, so I'm not taking the easy way out, so I'll explain to you what I mean by that. This is going to be by far one of the shortest videos that I ever do because I want it to be quick, I want it to be concise, and I want it to be to the point, okay? Here's two ways you can figure out what you're supposed to be fishing when you're supposed to be fishing it so that you can catch more fish. First, if you see wading birds in the trees or sitting on the side with their leg tucked in and they're like hunched up like this and they're not fishing, because that's what they do. In fact, they're the only true pro fishermen on the lake because they're the ones that make a living solely off catching fish. So they're not eating insects and birds and that other thing. They're basically making their living off of fish. So power versus finesse. This is a two-for tip as well. First of all, if you're not using lunar times to practice fishing better or to improve your fishing practices, then I think you're wrong. But I'll talk about that in another video. Peak feeding times can easily be found on Bass Forecast. The charts are pretty easy, but you can learn more about that by investigating and Googling and reading and learning about vector tables. That's a whole nother video. We'll get into that later. But Bass Forecast does all the work for you. You just look at their app and there's a perfect layout. It tells you the peak feeding times, tells you the day rating. What I want you to avoid is saying, well, it says it's not a good fishing day, so I'm not going. That's a good day to go back to what I said about spook scouting. That's a day what I said about, topwater scouting. And that's a good way to go out and find spots to fish and focus on scouting instead of fishing. Or it's also a great day to just slow it down and catch more fish. The definition of a good day is that your peak feeding time is during the time when the fish should be the most active and during a time when the lunar effect is the most prominent. So if you can't fish during the time that the peak feeding time is the most prominent, you should slow it down. So I'm gonna make this short. Like I promised you in the beginning of the video. If it is a peak feeding time, if the charts say that this is the big time, the activity time, power fish, spinner baits, buzz baits, wake baits, waking a spinner bait. In fact, one of my favorite baits, and I'm gonna talk a little longer than I said, is one of these little Indiana blade, small spinner baits, because you can reel it fast, you can hold your rod tip up and reel it slow, and you can bulge it below the surface, stays in the strike zone a long time, and it catches a lot of fish. So that's more of a combination of power and finesse, and I fish that on the taper up to the feeding time and the taper down to the feeding time, and sometimes even during the peak feeding time. But peak feeding time, power fish, buzz baits, spinner baits, whopper ploppers, top waters that actually create a lot of agitation, things that fish needs to come from a distance to grab. Off peak is finesse. So when you see that wading bird sitting in the tree, when you see him tucked up and he's not fishing, you should slow it way down because you're gonna have to put it in that fish's face to get him to eat it. I'll talk about this whole concept in a lunar video later on in the series, but for the most part, I want you to use some type of lunar app. I want you to build your confidence in understanding how this works, and I want you to power fish during peak fishing times, and I want you to slow it down and finesse, and during the transition times, the hour before the peak feeding time and the hour after it starts to taper off, use something like a faster moving bait slow, like a spinner bait, or take a soft plastic swim bait, take the weight off of it and slow reel it to that upper part of the water column, bump it into lily pads, bump it into tree tops, bump it into stick ups, and look for that reaction bite, because for the most part, fish aren't gonna chase it down. Power fish during the peak times, birds down in the water up to their knees, not up in the trees, and you're gonna catch more fish. Power fish peak times, finesse fish off peak. So to answer to the question, which I can't remember where I found it, so thank you for whoever asked it. But the answer to the question is, during springtime, should I focus on fishing power fishing techniques or finesse techniques? And the answer to that question is yes. So Hopefully you learned something from this video, and hopefully you're learning something from all the Faces of Fishing videos. If you're new to the channel, check out my playlist. My playlist group videos together by series, topic, subject, and things along those lines. I'm really excited about bringing you guys the Faces of Fishing, getting way more in depth with a lot of these topics. Couldn't do it without your awesome support. Thanks for all the comments. Thanks for all of the thumbs ups, the likes. All of that stuff helps grow the channel. I appreciate it. It takes a little bit of time for you. Means a whole lot to me. So if you could, be so kind, smash that thumbs up button. Leave a comment in the comment section, and I'll make your comment from the comment section a selection for a future video. I'll shout you out. I'll talk about you. I'll even screenshot it and put it in the video. But for now, we're going to take off. Subscribe, turn on your notifications so you'll know each and every time I release a new video. And yeah, love y'all. See you in the next one.